Welcome back. It's been a hot second. Today I wanted to show you some of the most impactful books that I've read. These have all impacted my life in some sort of way. I have changed because of them. I am a new person because of these books. I think that everyone should read these. The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. I did not expect this book to impact me the way it did. So in this book, the main character unalives herself because of a bunch of regrets in her life, like being a failed athlete and a bunch of others. So after she unalives herself, she ends up at the Midnight Library, which is like the midpoint between Earth and the afterlife. This library has like an infinite number of books, and each book is basically a different version of her life that could have played out. Kind of like Everything Everywhere All at Once, where the mom gets to see different versions of her life, like when she became like a famous opera singer and where she didn't marry her husband, only to realize that the life she had was the one she wanted. The reason why this book really impacted me was because I never got into any of my dream schools, and I ended up choosing one of my safe choices, and there was this constant shame and discomfort that followed me throughout college. Even up until my last year in college, a part of me still thought I was less valuable and worthless because I didn't get into one of these schools. Then around the time that I was graduating, I came across this book and it just put everything into perspective. And it made me think, so what if I got into Columbia? Would I have liked it? Would my life there really be better than the one I have now? I know that right now I'm very happy with what I've achieved and what I have, and I really can't say the same in that other life where I went to Columbia. Also, I think a lot of people want to go to these schools so they have that juicy Ivy League branding that they can use, and I totally get it because I used to be very enticed and drawn to that too. But when I really think about it, I feel like that novelty and that excitement would wear off very quickly and would be quickly replaced by the day-to-day struggles of surviving as a student and like just living in this world. This book helped me realize that I've been romanticizing these other lives in a very unrealistic way, and it helps me just fully appreciate the life that I already have. Next, we have Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker. First of all, I love this cover, it's so cute. This author is a professor of neuroscience at UC Berkeley, so he knows his stuff. In this book, he talks about some misconceptions we have around sleep, the meaning behind dreams we have, and how sleep affects our memory. This book forever changed how I view sleep. I overall just found this book so interesting. I learned a lot more than I thought I would. I felt like I've seen and read it all about sleep, but apparently not. There's a bunch of new stuff in here that I learned. I really liked how the author took the time to explain things in a way that makes it accessible to people who aren't scientists. So I'm a night owl, and I've always thought that it was because I'm lazy, but according to Matthew Walker, an adult's owlness or larkness, also known as their chronotype, is strongly determined by genetics. If you are a night owl, it's likely that one or both of your parents is a night owl. Naturally, waking up at 6 a.m. is very difficult for me, and every time I fail to do that, I just feel like I am not disciplined or something. But after I read this, I just felt like a weight lift off my shoulders. I don't feel as bad waking up late anymore, and I just try to make it work. I will say, if you are prone to anxiety or sleep anxiety, maybe don't read this, because I got sleep anxiety for like a week after I read this book. I think the tone is so like urgent and serious that I felt so much pressure to get perfect sleep every night, and that kept me up, which is very ironic. It went away after a week, but I still think it was worth reading just because of how much you learn about sleep and the inner workings of sleep. The next book is Attached by Amir Levine. My therapist recommended me this book when I was coming out of a very turbulent year-long relationship, and this book helped me see how dysfunctional that relationship truly was. You've probably heard of attachment styles already, but there are 3 of them. There's secure, anxious, and avoidant. But this book goes a step further, and it explains how these attachment styles affect each other, for better or for worse. What makes this book different and very impactful is that it doesn't just float around a bunch of attachment theory, it actually gives you actionable things that you can do right away. This book gives you a lot of examples of arguments and conversations between couples, and they're so scarily accurate. It's like the author himself followed me with a notebook and wrote down all the fights I had with this person, emotional nuances and all. So it was a little triggering. I was like getting flashbacks of a lot of the feelings that I was having in these moments. For me, this book just really helped me be aware of my own needs as someone with an anxious attachment style. This book also shows you how healthy conflict resolution looks like, and that can be very eye-opening for some people. Like for me, when I was in that relationship, a lot of the ways that we were solving things were completely wrong, like just very damaging, and this book helped me see a healthier way of doing that. The next book is called Carrie Soto is Back by Taylor Jenkins Reid. You might know her from The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, which is also an amazing book. This book is about Carrie Soto, who becomes like the best tennis player in the world. She goes into retirement and then decides to return when she sees this new tennis player who's younger, who's about to take all of her records. I wouldn't dismiss this book just because it's like a sports book. I'm not super into sports, but I really enjoyed this book. In the beginning, I really did not like Carrie because she's an absolute bitch. She's very cocky and selfish at times. But as the book went on, she really grew on me because I really respected how she was very true to herself. Even though it came off really obnoxious sometimes, like she did not care about faking it for the cameras to seem like this put together person. Her relationship with her father is also something very special. In this book, he is her coach, and their relationship is something I could only dream of. Reading about it literally gave me goosebumps sometimes. His presence in this book just feels like a warm blanket and is a figure that I wish I had in my life. Yeah, I just think Taylor Jenkins Reid makes these really beautiful stories with characters that feel very real. I feel like this story at its core is about appreciating what we have while it's still good. Once those things are over, we should be able to see how beautiful they were while they lasted and then move on, which is really fucking depressing to think about, and I haven't like internalized that completely, but I just think the way this story showed that was really beautiful. Next, I want to talk about Quiet by Susan Cain. This book was very popular a few years ago, and I finally got around to reading this. This was a difficult and uncomfortable book for me, but in a good way. I noticed myself resisting a lot of the things she was saying about introverts, and I realized it was because I don't think I like that part of myself in American culture. Like growing up, I always felt like there was this extrovert ideal that I should be striving towards. Ever since I was young, I've always tried to force myself to be more extroverted and less introverted, and there was definitely some deep-seated issues that this book made me look at and resolve. I feel like the narrative around extroverts is just overwhelmingly positive. Extroverts have more fun, they go to more parties, they have more friends, they're more charismatic, whatever. But God forbid if you're an introvert, you're awkward, you're antisocial, and you're too quiet. What I appreciated about this book is that it gives a very balanced perspective about introverts and extroverts. She talks about how extroverts tend to be more reward sensitive, so they're more likely to get addicted to gambling, have risky sex, participate in high-risk sports. But introverts are better at regulating feelings of desire, they're better at reasoning, they're more likely to stick to a plan, and they take less financial risk. Even after finishing this book months later, my mind always comes back to these ideas. It just helped me see a lot of the things that I was taking for granted being an introvert. I just didn't expect this book to expose me and expose all these deep-seated things I had against introversion. I feel like this brought me to a more accepting place. Definitely give this a read. Next, I want to talk about The Almanac of Naval Ravikant. I bought this book to help ground myself when I was working on this channel, but I actually came away with a lot more than just like business advice. I feel like the second half has like tons of jaw-dropping life advice that I didn't know I needed. I don't know what water he was drinking when he was a kid, but this guy is so profound. I had to put this book down multiple times and stare off at a wall just to let whatever thing he just said sink in. Here's one of my favorite quotes from this book. I only really want to do things for their own sake. Whether it's business, exercise, romance, friendship, I think the meaning of life is to do things for their own sake. Ironically, when you do things for their own sake, you create your best work. Whenever I start a hobby, like the most recent one was like guitar, there's this voice that creeps into my mind that says like, why are we playing guitar if it doesn't pay the bills? Even if I feel passionate about it, I feel a need to justify it. Like I need a practical reason to do it. And this is just the quickest way to suck out the joy out of anything. When I do things for their own sake without any strings attached, that's when I have the most fun, and that's when I do it for the longest. It's kind of weird and paradoxical almost that we have to care and want something less in order to feel happy doing it. This book is filled with insightful ideas like this. I always pick up this book whenever I feel a little lost in my career. This book has definitely changed my life. Everyone should read it. Next, I want to talk about this book called The Humans by Matt Haig. I love this book with every fiber of my being. If you haven't read this, you need to run, don't walk, to buy this. This is another book by Matt Haig. His books just make me feel alive and existential in a good way. So this book is about an alien who is sent on a mission to abduct this professor who has figured out the Riemann hypothesis. For the aliens, if the humans figure out the solution to the Riemann hypothesis, it's bad news for them. So after abducting the professor, the alien has to basically disguise himself as the professor and get rid of any trace of the solution. This book is so good that I think that if I were ever to feel depressed, I would reach for this to cure my depression. It's such a wholesome, witty, funny book. I think it's really easy to feel pessimistic about humans. We're very flawed, we are insecure, we judge other people, and we make a lot of mistakes. But this book helps me appreciate how weird and lovable humans are. Like, we are very funny creatures. If you read one book from this video, please read this one. The next book I want to talk about is The Shape of Design by Frank Camaro. This book cover is the most stunning cover I've ever seen in my life, and you can tell the author knows his audience. This book is geared towards designers, so if you're a fashion designer, interior designer, or graphic designer, this book will benefit you. So I used to do graphic design and now I'm a UI designer. I was using this book as sort of a resource. It's really about the thought process behind making good design and why we design in the first place. I really like how he talks about what happens when we get creatively blocked. He says that when we're creatively blocked, it comes from an imbalanced relationship of how and why. Either we have an idea but lack the skills to execute, or we have the skills but lack a message, idea, or purpose for the work. And I really relate to this because whenever I start a project, it is so tempting to just jump into figuring out how to do something instead of stopping myself and thinking about why. And I think it's because figuring out how to do something is as easy as finding a YouTube tutorial for it, but there's really no tutorial on the purpose. This book basically changed how I see design as a whole, and I feel like if you're in any creative field, this book should be required reading. A lot of the ideas in this book are really transferable to other creative fields. So that was all I had for today. Let me know if you end up picking up any of these books, and I hope you enjoyed. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.